Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/Great Detectives. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. Our listener support and appreciation campaign continues, and you can support the show on a one-time basis using the Zelle app to box13 at greatdetectives.net. And I want to thank Scott for supporting the program that way. Of course, our big focus is on Patreon support, and I want to welcome Joseph as our latest Patreon supporter at the Chief of Detectives level of $30 or more per month. Thank you so much for your support, Joseph. And you can become one of our Patreon supporters over at patreon.greatdetectives.net for as little as $2 per month. But now it is time for this week's episode of Mr. Chameleon. The original air date, November 16th, 1949, and the title is The Party Girl Murder Case.
Next, Mr. Chameleon and the Party Girl Murder Case. Tonight, we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters in his famous cases of crime and murder, brought to you by the makers of genuine Bayer aspirin. Mr. Chameleon, as you know, is the famous and dreaded detective who frequently uses a disguise to track down a killer, a disguise which at all times is recognized by the audience. Tonight, we give you Mr. Chameleon in The Party Girl Murder Case. Our story opens at Central Police Headquarters at the dull, cold hour of 6 a.m. And as Mr. Chameleon, the great detective, enters the office of the Commissioner of Police, he tries, unsuccessfully, to suppress a yawn.
Good morning, Commissioner. Oh, isn't it so good?
Not so good for a girl named Babs Clinton, Chameleon.
Oh?
Beautiful girl, according to her husband. He was half hysterical when he called us on the telephone just now. Kept babbling over and over. She was so beautiful. She was so beautiful.
Murdered?
Yes, Chameleon. Stabbed in the chest. She didn't come home all night, and her husband naturally was worried. Got up and dressed. About half an hour ago, found her body in the vestibule of the walk-up where they live.
That's a new story, Commissioner.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Chameleon. The husband, Jack Clinton, could have done it himself. Well, that's for you to find out, Chameleon. Get up there with Dave Arnold. From now on, it's all yours.
And not long afterwards, we find Chameleon with Detective Dave Arnold examining the beautiful, lifeless body of Babs Clinton, still sprawled in the vestibule of the dingy walk-up where she was found. And Chameleon is saying to the trembling man beside him,
Just what time did you find your wife's body, Mr. Clinton?
About 5:30. Yes, half past 5.
Where is your apartment?
Right here on the first floor. You see, I'm an invalid. I've been very ill. I can't climb stairs. And Babs looked after me. She looked after me.
I know, Mr. Clinton. Let's go into your apartment, shall we? We have more privacy. Dave, you keep those sightseers out of here, please.
Okay, Mr. Chameleon.
This is the apartment.
Oh, thank you.
Will they be taking Babs away?
Yes, Mr. Clinton. They have to perform an autopsy. Your wife was murdered, you know. Tell me, do you sleep well?
No, Mr. Chameleon.
And last night you were worried about your wife's absence, so you didn't sleep at all.
That's right.
Now, you were awake, and your apartment is right next to the vestibule where your wife was stabbed to death. Yet you heard nothing?
Nothing. Good Lord, you believe me, don't you?
My job is to ask questions and weigh the answers, Mr. Clinton. Now, you say you're an invalid. Did your wife support you?
She had to. She supported me and our 3-year-old daughter, who's with her grandmother right now.
Mm-hmm. What did your wife do? What'd she do, Mr. Clinton?
Why, she worked as a salesgirl at Allen's department store.
And she supported a family of 3 on a salesgirl's salary? No, Mr. Clinton.
Oh, you're quite right. An old friend of hers, Sandra Walker, persuaded Babs to take a job with the Drum Escort Agency at night.
Oh, I've heard of that agency. They supply both male and female escorts for lonely people who want to go to the theater or a nightclub, isn't that it?
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Babs said it was perfectly respectable. She had no trouble at all until...
Until what, Mr. Clinton?
Until she met Miles Lawrence. She went to dinner with him one night. He's the one who made the trouble. He called her, sent her flowers, made things so difficult that only yesterday she gave notice to the Drum Escort Agency. He was crazy about her, Mr. Chameleon, but Babs loved me. She loved me.
I'm sure she did, Mr. Clinton.
But don't you see, that's why she was killed. Miles Lawrence killed her, because she turned him down and he wasn't used to that.
Yeah, I'm sure of that, too. I mean, I'm sure that he wasn't used to being turned down.
You've heard of him?
Anyone who reads the tabloids has heard of Miles Lawrence. He's the classic example of a wealthy playboy.
And you think he killed her?
I didn't say that, Mr. Clinton. Look, I want you to take it as easy as you can. I'll be back during the day.
Are you going to question Miles Lawrence?
Miles Lawrence and a few others. Goodbye, Mr. Clinton. Dave, you been out here? Did you hear most of the conversation?
I sure did, Mr. Chameleon. What sort of a guy is it who'll let his wife work for an escort agency? How do we even know he's an invalid, like he says?
Well, that's easily checked. And if it's the truth...
Then it's all the more reason why Miles Lawrence had more to offer the girl.
Dave, you're very cynical. Maybe Babs Clinton loved her husband.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he loved her. Maybe he loved her so much, Mr. Chameleon, that he killed her rather than let Miles Lawrence get her.
Possibly. There's one question I find rather intriguing. Why should a man of Miles Lawrence's wealth and position go to an escort agency to find a dinner companion? In fact, the Drum Escort Agency interests me exceedingly. And I think, Dave, the sooner we get there, the better.
And a little later, Mr. Chameleon and Detective Dave Arnold enter the offices of the Drum Escort Agency. And as they close the door behind them, the flamboyant figure of a man emerges quickly from another room and says graciously,
Good morning, gentlemen. What can I do for you? You're a bit early, but then the early bird catches the worm. Or the most beautiful dinner companions on our list. All our young ladies are beautiful and charming.
And none more beautiful than Babs Clinton. Is that right?
Why do you say that?
Are you head of this agency?
I am, sir. Felita's Drum at your service. And you?
I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters. This is Detective Dave Arnold. Babs Clinton has been murdered.
I know she has. I heard it on the radio, Mr. Chameleon. That poor, unfortunate girl. And as you say, none more beautiful.
Mr. Drum, exactly how does this agency of yours operate?
Well, suppose you were a stranger in the city and wanted a companion at dinner or the theater.
Yes?
I'd first insist on absolute credentials of your respectability and standing.
I see.
Then, if they were all right, I'd supply you with a charming and intelligent companion for the evening. And if you were a woman, I'd supply you with an equally personable and decent escort.
Well, that's quite clear to me.
Look at those pictures on the wall. Did you ever see a more attractive group of people? Ladies and gentlemen, everyone.
You seem very proud of your employees, Mr. Drum.
I am, Mr. Chameleon. I consider this agency a boon to mankind.
How?
It keeps lonely men and women in the city out of trouble. I'm doing a great humane work.
And being paid well for it, I imagine.
Is that wrong, Mr. Chameleon? One good deed deserves another. I brighten lonely lives, they give me a fee. Fair enough?
Depends on the fee, Mr. Drum. You have a great many mottos on the wall, I see. The wages of sin are death. Follow the golden rule.
I am a puritanical man. My agency is closed on Sunday. I myself attend church twice on Sundays. Another motto of mine
All right,
is...
never mind your mottos, Mr. Drum. They won't help us solve Babs Clinton's murder.
They might, Dave. You can't tell. As a matter of fact, Mr. Drum, I have a motto hanging over my desk. The innocent must be protected. The guilty must be punished. And someone is guilty of Babs Clinton's murder.
Well, don't look at me, Mr. Chameleon. I didn't do it.
Do you know the girl well? Did you ever take her out?
Yes. I took her out because I've always considered it good business to be seen in public with some of my charming employees.
Mm-hmm. Did you take her out more often than the others?
Mr. Chameleon, evil to him who evil thinks.
Well, that answers my question. You took her out quite often. Did you take her out last night?
No, I did not.
You know who she was with? Was it Miles Lawrence?
I beg your pardon?
You heard him, Mr. Drum. Was it Miles Lawrence?
Miles Lawrence is a gentleman and a man of integrity. I would trust him with my own daughter if I had a daughter. He's upright and honorable.
And a valuable client. Mr. Drum, could it be that there is someone behind that closed door in your inner office? I think I'd better find out.
Mr. Chameleon, wait.
Ah, I was right. There is someone here. Are you Miles Lawrence?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. I'm Miles Lawrence.
What are you doing here so early in the morning? And, Mr. Drum, why didn't you tell me he was here?
Mr. Chameleon, a friend in need is a friend indeed. I am Mr. Lawrence's friend.
So he came to you for an alibi, Mr. Drum. He took Babs Clinton out last night and he wanted an alibi.
Oh, no, Mr. Chameleon. I have an alibi. A real one.
But you took Babs out last night?
Yes, I did. I drove her home at 2 a.m. That is, my chauffeur drove us there. I left Babs outside. Her husband was a very jealous man. Then I spent the night with my good friend, Bob Ellsworth.
Mm-hmm. So you have an airtight alibi. I agree, Mr. Lawrence. Bob Ellsworth is a playboy with a very unsavory reputation. I'm sure he'll back you up. And so will your chauffeur.
I'm sure they will, too. As for Mr. Drum here, well, I came here to ask him for a character reference.
Yes, well, he gave you one. A friend in need is a friend indeed. You were prepared for the worst, weren't you, Mr. Lawrence?
That doesn't mean I'm a murderer.
Well, just what are you, Mr. Lawrence? Explain to me why a man of your wealth and position should have to come to an escort agency for a dinner and theater companion.
I did it at first as a gag.
And then you met Babs Clinton, and you fell in love with her.
Yes, but I did not kill her.
Mr. Lawrence, did you ever meet Babs' friend, Sandra Walker, the girl who persuaded Babs to take a job here?
Why,
Yes?
I don't remember, Mr. Chameleon. I've met so many attractive women, I can't remember them all.
Oh, I see. All right, Mr. Lawrence, that's all for now. Come along, Dave.
Are you leaving us, Mr. Chameleon?
Yes, Mr. Drum, but I shall be back.
I hope so. I only wish I could serve you professionally. I've done so much for lonely people who are adrift in the world. I might even be able to find a young lady companion for Detective Arnold.
Is that so? There are plenty of dames who like to go out with me.
Come along, Dave.
Guy thinks he's funny.
Well, I don't, Dave. I think Felicitas Drum is a very strange man who puts on an act that is far from convincing. That do-good exterior could hide almost anything.
Even a murderer?
Too soon to say that, Dave. But, look, I'm going back to headquarters, and I want you to pick up the dead girl's friend, Sandra Walker, and bring her to me as quickly as possible.
But at Central Police Headquarters, Mr. Chameleon finds a surprise awaiting him. As he enters his office, a shabby, gentle old man is seated by his desk, and the old man rises and smiles timidly.
Are you Mr. Chameleon?
Yes, I am.
I'm Arthur Clinton, Jack Clinton's father.
Mr. Clinton, how do you do? I suppose you're here about your daughter-in-law's murder. Do you live with them?
No, I'm independent, thank heaven. I work as a cashier.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't take anything from her. I came here, Mr. Chameleon, because I thought you should know about her, just as I thought my poor son should know about her.
What did you think he should know about his wife?
That she was a party girl, sir. That she worked for an escort agency.
Well, he did know that.
Not till yesterday, Mr. Chameleon.
He didn't know till yesterday that his wife was a paid escort for various men?
No, Mr. Chameleon. I was the one who told him, and I blame myself now. Maybe I shouldn't have done it, but I was so upset.
Well, your daughter-in-law had to make money, Mr. Clinton. May have been quite respectable.
You think Miles Lawrence is respectable? You think her carrying on with him was respectable?
Mr. Clinton, how did you know about that? Did Babs Clinton tell you?
Hardly, Mr. Chameleon.
Well, then how'd you find out?
It was very strange. The other night I went to see my son, and in front of the little walk-up building where they lived, there was a girl standing, crying like her heart would break.
Go on.
Well, I asked her what was the trouble. She said she was waiting for Babs Clinton, said that she hated Bab, and then she sobbed worse than ever. She said Babs was working for that escort agency, and she spoke of Miles Lawrence. That's how I found out. And then I lost my head. I told my son.
What was the girl's name?
I don't know, Mr. Chameleon.
Didn't you ask her?
Yes, but she got scared and ran away.
Mr. Clinton, can you describe her? This is very important.
Mr. Chameleon,
Yes, Dave, what is it?
I picked up Sandra Walker. There she is in the anteroom.
Sandra Walker?
What's the matter, Mr. Clinton?
Well, that's the one. That girl sitting in the anteroom is the girl who said that she hated Babs.
Mr. Chameleon and the Party Girl murder case continues in just a moment. At the first sign of a cold, before you do anything else, take Bayer aspirin. Here's why. When you have a cold, it's almost invariably accompanied by a headachy, feverish feeling and muscular aches and pains. And it's very important to your well-being that you treat these distressing symptoms with a medication that will relieve them quickly. And Bayer aspirin will do this. No matter how you try to stop or shorten a cold, we believe that your own doctor will tell you that this is sound advice. And when you use Bayer aspirin, you'll discover why millions have followed this advice with remarkable results. For Bayer aspirin is actually ready to go to work in 2 seconds to bring you amazingly quick relief. In addition, Bayer aspirin's single active ingredient is so gentle to the system, doctors regularly prescribe it even for small children. That's why it's been used by millions of normal people without ill effect. So remember, at the first sign of a cold, before you do anything else, take Bayer aspirin. When you buy, ask for Bayer aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle, and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. And now back to Mr. Chameleon and the Party Girl murder case. The fatal stabbing of Babs Clinton by an unknown assailant has led Mr. Chameleon into strange byways, and none more strange than the Drum Escort Agency where Babs worked. And now, in his office, we find him questioning Sandra Walker, a friend of Babs, who also worked for the escort agency. And he is saying to her,
Miss Walker, Babs' father-in-law positively identified you as the girl he saw weeping outside Babs' apartment building, so don't deny it.
All right, I won't deny it, Mr. Chameleon. But what does that prove? You can't accuse me of anything.
I haven't accused you of anything yet. But I'd like to know where you were between 3 and 5 a.m., the time that Babs Clinton was murdered.
I was home in bed asleep. Where do you think I was? Hiding in the vestibule of Babs' apartment building?
I don't know. I'm asking you. I'd also like you to tell me why you hated Babs Clinton.
I didn't hate her. We were friends. I got her the job at the Drum Escort Agency.
Nevertheless, you told her father-in-law that you hated her. Why?
She was taking work away from me. I used to be the most popular girl at the escort agency. But after Babs went to work there they all wanted her.
That is only a half-truth, isn't it, Miss Walker?
What do you mean?
Didn't you have a more personal reason for disliking Babs Clinton? Something to do with Miles Lawrence?
That's ridiculous.
Is it?
Yes, it is. I hardly know Miles Lawrence.
Miss Walker, Miles Lawrence is a well-known playboy. The papers are always printing juicy items about him.
Well?
I've gone through some back issues. Now, there were several accounts of his being seen at the swankier nightclubs with an unknown beauty. Were you the lady referred to?
I told you, Mr. Chameleon, I hardly know Miles Lawrence.
And when I mentioned your name to Miles Lawrence, he couldn't remember who you were.
Well, then, how can you possibly link us together? Mr. Chameleon, what are you doing?
I'm looking for his phone number, Miss Walker. I always carry the phone numbers of any suspects in a case. Yes, here we are. Please dial this number, Miss Walker.
Mr. Chameleon.
Do as I tell you, please.
What are you going to do?
listen to your conversation on this extension. And when he answers, Miss Walker, just say, "Hello, Miles."
No, I can't.
Miss Walker, your friend Babs Clinton was murdered. If you refuse to help
Hello?
me...
Hello?
Go ahead, Miss Walker.
Hello, Miles.
Sandra. Darling, where are you calling from?
From Central Police Headquarters, Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Chameleon.
I just wanted to find out whether you really knew her or not. Thank you for your cooperation. That's all, Miss Walker. You may hang up now. And you were the unknown beauty referred to, weren't you?
Yes, I was. And Babs took Miles away from me. But I didn't kill her, Mr. Chameleon. I swear I didn't.
Someone did, Miss Walker. Someone did. You may go now, out that door, and tell Jack Clinton's father that he can leave now, too.
What are you going to do, Mr. Chameleon?
Keep on working. Good afternoon. Dave.
Right here, Mr. Chameleon. You know, she looks pretty bad to me. If Babs Clinton took Lawrence away from her...
Yes, she looks pretty bad, but so do all of them. It's the trouble. They all look guilty. I have a hunch that is what is leading me down a blind alley.
Well, how do you mean, Mr. Chameleon?
No, I mean there's more in this case than meets the eye. Philetus Drum, for instance, and his escort agency. Whenever I find someone with a phony exterior like Drum's, I'm almost certain that that exterior conceals a criminal. Dave, I'm going in there.
In disguise, Mr. Chameleon?
Yes, Dave. Going to apply for a job. I'm going to become one of Mr. Drum's highly respectable male escorts. I'll take the name of Ted Carter. Not too young, not too old. The perfect dinner companion for middle-aged women. I'll spend as much time as I can around the agency, and we'll see what he's hidden behind that sanctimonious front.
And nearly a week later, we find Mr. Chameleon in his disguise as Ted Carter, one of Philetus Drum's employees. And in the late afternoon, he is in Philetus Drum's office, saying, in the syrupy voice of his disguise,
Are you sure I've been satisfactory, Mr. Drum?
Very, my boy. Completely satisfactory. I do a great work here. I supply escorts, companionship for the lonely. I'm a benefactor of mankind.
Indeed you are, Mr. Drum.
I'm glad you agree, Ted. Anyway, I have a very high standard for escorts, and you've met that standard. I find you quite worthy to represent the name of Philetus Drum.
Thank you, Mr. Drum. Thank you very much. By the way, while you were out, Sandra Walker called.
Did she? Poor Sandra. She's so nervous these days, she's no good at the job at all.
And, Miles Lawrence called, too. He left no message.
Miles Lawrence is a very fine gentleman, Ted, a much maligned man.
I'm sure he is, Mr. Drum. I'd better be going now. I have a 6 o'clock appointment.
Then you run along, my boy, and bless you.
Dave, you there?
Yeah, I've been waiting, Mr. Chameleon. Any luck today?
None, Dave, none. I've been hanging around that office in disguise for a week, and I failed completely.
Something will break.
Well, I've mentioned Sandra's name and Miles Lawrence. That disturbs Philetus Drum. He doesn't give a sign. I've watched, listened, all to no avail. Apparently, that is a perfectly respectable agency.
You'll get it sometime, Mr. Chameleon.
When? It's terrible to feel that you failed, that a murderer is still on the loose. I was so sure that Philetus Drum's philanthropic exterior hid something bad. You know, that theory has worked for me so often.
What's the matter, Mr. Chameleon?
Something just hit me like a bolt of lightning. Dave, I think I got it. I think maybe I've got it.
Yeah?
Dave, I want everyone brought to headquarters. Miles Lawrence, Sandra Walker, and the murdered girl's husband, Jack Clinton, and his father, old Mr. Clinton. Put Miles Lawrence and old Mr. Clinton in separate rooms, but I'll question the husband, Jack, and Sandra together.
But why those two together?
Because that is where the answer lies. Dave, I think I finally hit on the truth.
And so, at headquarters, it is arranged as Mr. Chameleon has ordered. And we find him in his office with Detective Arnold in the background, grimly confronting Sandra Walker and Jack Clinton, and saying to them,
You two have been pretty clever. It took me a long while to recognize the truth, but I know it now.
Do you mind explaining what you're talking about, Mr. Chameleon?
I'm talking about the way you fooled everyone, Miss Walker, especially your murdered friend. Babs Clinton.
Sandra fooled Babs?
Yes, Mr. Clinton. She also fooled your father, who found her weeping one night, presumably because Babs had taken Miles Lawrence away from her. When all the time, Mr. Clinton, this girl here was in love with you.
What?
Sandra in love with me?
Oh, Jackie's crazy. This chameleon doesn't know what he's saying.
I know exactly what I'm saying, Miss Walker. You knew Miles Lawrence wouldn't marry you, but you decided that Jack Clinton eventually would.
No.
The solution is just the reverse from what your father thought it was, Jack. It's you and Sandra who've been in love, not Babs and Miles Lawrence.
I won't stand for this, Mr. Chameleon. I am not in love with Sandra. I love my wife.
Maybe. Maybe not. Anyway, I have proof that Sandra loves you. And after Babs' death, eventually hope to marry you. Still expects to, in fact.
Mr. Chameleon, are you saying that the two of us together killed Babs?
I have no evidence of that. You might even have done it singly. Or you, Miss Walker, might have killed her, not because of Miles Lawrence, but because, as I say, you wanted her husband.
Shut up, you.
And still stand an excellent chance of getting him, I'd say.
Shut up!
Easy does it, Mr. Clinton. No rough stuff.
Okay, Dave, let him go. I'm through with you both for the present. I just wanted you to know that I was on to you, Miss Walker.
But you aren't, Mr. Chameleon. You're all wrong. You're all wrong.
Oh, that should do it, Dave. That should turn the trick. Give him a head start. Now listen. Listen carefully. All right, Dave, let's go. Can you see Sandra Walker, Dave?
Yes. She's going down the street alone. Jack Clinton must have left her.
Good, good. We must keep close behind her, yet not too close. Dave, there's the other one. It's working. It's working.
He's stopping her?
Yes, come on, come on. All right, Arthur Clinton, drop that knife. You're not going to murder Sandra Walker the way you murdered your daughter-in-law.
Let go of me, Mr. Chameleon. This is a wicked woman, just the way Babs was a wicked woman.
I know. You killed poor Babs because you thought she wasn't good enough for your son.
And she wasn't. And now this one's trying to get him. But I'm his father. I'll protect him from the wickedness in this world. I'll protect him the way I protected him before.
So you admit that you killed Babs?
Yes, and I'm glad. I'm glad, Mr. Chameleon. I'd kill any woman who tries to ruin my son.
You'll never kill anyone again, Mr. Clinton. Dave, you take him back to headquarters, please.
Yes, Mr. Chameleon.
As for you, Miss Walker, I'm sorry I had to put you through this, but it was the only way of bringing the killer out into the open.
Then you knew those were lies about Jack and me.
Of course. But I wanted Arthur Clinton to believe them. That's why I had him in an adjoining room when I accused you and Jack. Oh, it's strange. It wasn't Felita's drum's phony exterior that concealed a murderer. It was old Arthur Clinton's gentle manner that hid a fanatical killer. My theory was right. I just had the wrong man at first.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. Have you tried breaking an aspirin tablet to give your children the dosage your doctor has prescribed? If you have, then you'll appreciate the new children's size Bayer aspirin tablets. These tablets are genuine Bayer aspirin, but they contain only half the amount of the regular size Bayer aspirin tablets. Thus, you can give your child the proper dosage as prescribed by your physician, and you can do it conveniently. And because they are made so you can break them right in half, it's also easy for you to give still smaller dosages whenever necessary. Another thing you'll appreciate is that they are uncolored and unflavored, and therefore cannot be mistaken for candy. And you can use them with confidence. For the fact that doctors prescribe Bayer aspirin's single active ingredient even for the smallest children shows how gentle and dependable it is. The bottle and carton are plainly marked children's size Bayer aspirin, 30 tablets for 25 cents. Listen next Wednesday night at this same time for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in the marriage proposal murder case. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played by Karl Swenson, with dialogue by Marie Baumer From the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert. Music directed by Victor Arden. Your announcer is Howard Claney.
Important to everyone is the news of a remarkable scientific discovery, which now makes it possible to cut down tooth decay and the pain, worry, and expense that go with it. What you do is use new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Based on a formula developed by University of Illinois scientists, it cuts down tooth decay, actually helps prevent cavities. That's why so many dentists recommend this type dentifrice. So for sounder, healthier, handsomer teeth, use ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Both regular Dr. Lyon's tooth powder and new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's are at all drug and toilet goods counters.
Listen for Mr. Chameleon in the marriage proposal murder case next Wednesday night at this time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. So we get an acknowledgement of the sort of tropes that Chameleon uses to solve cases, and he's saying things like, this guy is acting like he's super virtuous, so he must be an evil killer, is a theory for basing a solution to a crime on, and thus my theory is right, I just chose the wrong suspect. There's a flaw with that thinking, because some people, even if they are acting super upright or look too virtuous or are really self-righteous, that doesn't mean they're killers. It's true that the guy who ran the escort service seemed a bit over the top. You could imagine Chameleon going through his office and saying, he's not only got the mottos and goes to church, he's got all these Thomas Kincaid pictures on the wall, and Thomas Kincaid hasn't even been born yet. Also, I don't like solutions where the detective puts an innocent civilian in harm's way to test out a theory. It's more justifiable if there's no other options, and they've seriously weighed out the risk and taken steps to protect the civilian. But does anyone think Mr. Chameleon has seriously done that? On the bright side, I got the killer. On the downside, you'll be reliving this moment of nearly being killed every day for the rest of your life and wake up screaming at least every other night. I think that's a fair deal, don't you? Finally, you have to appreciate the diligence of Dave Arnold being on the ball and protecting Chameleon, lest the character termed an invalid might harm him. The listener comments and feedback now. And we start out on YouTube on The Girl Who Typed Murder. Texas Chick 6153 writes, rope ladders were used to escape upper story rooms in the case of an emergency. And that was, I guess, regarding the ongoing concern about rope ladder salesmen. And I think that is still a use. You'll probably still find some emergency plans that do use rope ladders. Betsy writes, Encyclopedia Brown rocks. Indeed he does. And then we've got one from Kate who writes, hello, I really enjoy your programming. I wanted to explain a little about earrings in the early 20th century and a wee bit of history on pierced ears. First, many girls in France, Italy, Spain, and other European countries had pierced ears and small gold earrings they wore permanently. That's been traditional for a couple of centuries. It's a sign of quality. As far as pierced versus non-pierced, the pierced were part of a quality woman's accessories for centuries. Screwback earrings were invented in the 1800s. There were several types and versions, and with close examination you can figure out when they were made and sometimes who made them. This was the beginning of costume jewelry. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, screwbacks, then clip-ons, became popular, and earrings became bigger, fancier, with more colors, rhinestones, faux pearls, and all sorts of decorative elements. These costume earrings were hugely popular in the 40s and 50s. In the 60s, we fell for pierced earrings and became totally enamored of pierced gold and silver with genuine gemstones and semi-precious natural stones, hoops and dangles. Vintage jewelry became popular in the 90s, but by then everything was fun, exciting, beautiful, and individualistic. But understand, pierced were first for centuries, then screwbacks, then clips, then back to pierced. The vintage radio shows are grand and you are charming. Your discussions are fun and interesting. Well, thank you so much, Kate. I appreciate your kind words, as well as a clarification, because I'm not a super expert on the topic, and I think obviously you know of what you speak. And then we have a comment from Spotify. Adam Graham, he calls it like he sees it. He tells you what he thinks, but you never have to worry about the language he uses. He's the best at what he does. Well, thank you so much. I'm always aware that we've got a family audience, as I've had so many listeners notify me that they listen with their kids, so I'm aware of that. It is actually has an industry term called co-listening, and so I'm mindful of it. So it helps that I don't naturally curse too much, although I'm not bragging, and I have many, many other faults. That just doesn't tend to be one of them. I just want to be clear on that, because as we learn from this episode, that sort of thing can get you at the top of a murder suspect list. But again, thank you so much for your kind comments. And now we have a really good question from Derek, who writes, so who are your 4 detectives that would be on Mount Rushmore? I'll leave the criteria up to you, whether the success of their cases, success of the show, likability, longevity, impact on the future shows. Well, thank you so much for the question, Derek. Now, I would actually do a bit of work here, because I think that it is very hard to do a Mount Rushmore sort of thing. And it's an interesting trend, by the way. I think just started within the last couple of years, the sort of Mount Rushmore question. But I think it's hard to compare across mediums. A detective created for a book, different than one created for radio, different than one created for television. And so for me, I am setting up 3 separate Mount Rushmores for each of these mediums. So we'll have one for books, one for radio, and one for television. So when we start at detectives created for books, I think obviously it's got to be Sherlock Holmes first of all. I think the debt that anyone in the mystery writing profession or anything related to mysteries owes to Sherlock Holmes and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is immense. Yes, there were other detectives before Holmes, but he really made this genre popular. His stories, his adventures, his mysteries, they're enduring classics. They are readable now, 140 years on from when Doyle first wrote them. I think we'll probably be talking about Sherlock Holmes a century from now. And then it's got to be Poirot. And it's not just the number of Poirot mysteries, which is really substantial, but it's also the sheer number of Poirot stories that just are absolute classics. Things like Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express, Five Little Pigs. I mean, there are so many great stories. And people talk about the greatness of the Poirot TV series with David Suchet, and he is fantastic in it, but what he really does, And I think particularly before the later seasons when they start messing around with the stories, is he just brings out the brilliance that Christie already had in there. So truly remarkable. Then we've got Nero Wolfe. Nero Wolfe, just a fantastic run of stories, and I think managed to maintain some of its core elements even while the times changed. And again, we're talking about the original Rex Stout novels. I do think with Nero Wolfe, it's a case where the mysteries are usually fine, but what really carries them is the characters and the language and the way the stories are told. There's such a richness. There was renewed interest in the book series at the time of the 2000s TV series. And I think at this point it's a little less well known, but really well worth reading and experiencing. And the final head on Mount Rushmore, of course, is the greatest literary detective of them all, Encyclopedia Brown. No, okay, I'm kidding. Though I will say, love Encyclopedia Brown, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, all those great characters from my childhood. But the fourth head belongs to Philip Marlowe. I think it's fitting to have a detective from the hard-boiled school of detective fiction. And the Marlowe books really are the strongest and richest of the hard-boiled detective novels. The Big Sleep is an absolute classic, and so is Lady in the Lake, and I think that gets underrated a bit. The Long Goodbye is also another great novel, although I think it does kind of struggle at times with its own pretentiousness. And most of Chandler's other novels are very good, with the exception of Playback, which in my opinion is hot garbage. Now, of course, there were some detectives that I considered, but didn't include. Sam Spade is one. While I don't think The Maltese Falcon is as good as The Big Sleep, I think it's a more focused book, and it has more memorable characters. But given that outside of that novel, Spade only had 3 short stories, I have a problem putting him in that company. Father Brown I also considered. In some ways, his continuing popularity is partially a result of the popularity of G.K. Chesterton's other works, including his nonfiction. Father Brown also established a lot of ideas for detective fiction that others have incorporated in their own work. For example, the idea from his story The Invisible Man, where the killer was someone whose presence in the neighborhood was so common and accepted that it wasn't even noted that he was there. And The Son of the Broken Sword, where there's a great 2 lines of dialogue. The question, where does a wise man hide a leaf? The answer, in the forest, which is something that inspires stories where a single murder is hidden amongst a lot of other bodies. For example, blowing up an airplane where you're just targeting one individual, or committing a murder in the middle of a battle. So these stories really are influential, and I love them. But with Father Brown, I think it comes down to 2 points. First, I think that so many of his stories really are more thought experiments rather than stories about actual people. Good thought experiments, but nevertheless, one thing I will say for everyone else on the Mount Rushmore is that their stories include both short stories as well as full-length novels. And Father Brown never had a full-length novel. And I think being able to work well in both short fiction and novels is something that I find impressive with detectives who have a literary origin. Now, I did say that there are 2 more Mount Rushmores. We're not going to get into them today. I would expect we would continue this in another day. I don't think we have a ton that we'll have to talk about after Johnny Dollar. So we'll continue with the next Mount Rushmore in a future episode. Now let's go ahead and thank our Patreon supporter of the day. And I want to go ahead and thank BookGeek28, Patreon supporter since December 2021, currently supporting the podcast at the Shamus level of $4 or more per month. Thank you so much for your support, and that will actually do it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software, and if you're enjoying the podcast on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and mark the notification bell. We will be back next Thursday with Mr. and Mrs. North. But join us back here tomorrow for yours truly, Johnny Dollar, where...
You know where Lido Key is?
Lido?
Yeah, a mile or so offshore, just beyond St. Armand's Key, where we live.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, a client of mine, a man I've known for years. He retired, bought himself a piece of property there, built a nice little home on it. His name is Parley Barron.
So?
Well, I've handled all his insurance for him, including a straight life at $50,000.
Uh-huh. Beneficiary?
His wife, Laura Barron.
And what's happened to him?
Well, Friday morning, now that's the day before yesterday, he left the house just to do some errands.
Well, go on.
Yeah, well, he hadn't got back home by about 5 p.m., and his wife started calling around, trying to find out where he was, and nobody seemed to know. So finally, she put in a call to the police.
Who's your man there?
Sergeant Harry Brackett.
Oh, I remember him.
Sure.
Go on.
Well, then around 7 p.m., they found Barron's car. Found it parked down by one of the fishing docks.
But no sign of him.
Not a sign, not then or since.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, send your comments to box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/greatdetectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.